I have SANOG27 from NTA, Krishna from the IPCC. I think I just saw Dilip Agarwal from Worldly coming in, so you can join us. And then we'll also have some closing session formalities after the presentations are done. But we can start now. Our first speaker for this closing plenary is Mr. SANOG27. Mr. SANOG27 is the director at the Nepal Telecom Authority from the NTA. He's been there for a long time now. I don't remember when he joined, so he's been there since 2006, so almost 10 years. So he's a veteran of regulatory affairs in Nepal, and he also participates quite a lot in regional regulatory events. So Mr. Khanal will look or talk about regulatory impact on technology adoption in the telecom and ICT sector. Mr. Khanal, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Gauravji, for the nice presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Gauravji, for the nice introduction. I have been with the NTA for the last almost 10 years, and I was with Kathmandu University before for another 9 years. Telecommunications and ICT is my business, and now I'm with the regulatory agency in Nepal. And I understand and I have faced that regulatory instruments, legal frameworks, policies and strategies adopted by the governments and regulators have great impact on adoption of technology in terms of timing, in terms of affordability, in terms of creating infrastructures, and also creating the right environment for private investment. So I'll be setting the context. Everybody knows that. I think some of you might have noticed that there was talking about Internet of Things yesterday, and there was a projection of how many devices will be connected to the Internet in the next by 2020 and beyond. So the conclusion is that we have seen a tremendous growth in the telecommunications and ICT sector in terms of adoption of technology, services and applications. And this is not going to stop. It's going to continue. It's going to proliferate in the days to come, years to come. But this adoption has been uneven, and we talk about digital divide. We talk about digital divide that manifests in multiple dimensions. Between the countries, developed and developing, if you see the International Telecommunication Union database, they categorize developed and developing countries. And the World Bank and other international agencies. So one of the issues that we're talking about from the government and regulatory perspective is how to bridge the digital divide. Not only between the countries. Even if you see in a country, there is a divide between rural and urban areas. There is a divide between those who can afford and those who cannot afford, those who are literate and those who are not literate, those who have the capability to access because they are normal human beings, and those who have some kind of disability, those with different sets of ages. Some old age people cannot access ICT services. So this is one of the areas of concern for the government and the regulator, how to bridge the digital divide. And we are talking about sustainable development goals to be achieved in the next 15 years. And everybody knows that regulatory framework has a significant impact on technology adoption in the ever-burgeoning telecommunications and ICT sector. I will give ample examples how regulatory framework can positively and negatively impact on technology adoption. My personal feeling is that proactive regulators or the proactive governments ensure that all globally available technologies, services, and applications are allowed in their date, almost same date in any underdeveloped countries. So a proactive regulator or the proactive government will create an environment where these are available in their respective jurisdictions. This is the context in which I'm going to make my presentation. So I think this data is available for anybody to see, but I'll just you couldn't. No, I think I'm not able to open this file. So I'm just trying to present what is the global scenario of 2015. That's the 2015 estimate by per 100. So we see that in the developed countries, there's a 491 million subscribers of fixed telephony, which is 39% in terms of penetration. Developing is more 572 million and 9.4 in terms of the penetration is significantly smaller than the developed countries. The global average is 14.5 because the developing world contributes the developed and developing, you see, but in mobile, compared to the fixed, mobile penetration has significantly increased in the developing world, and that has been largely accepted by the people because of its regulatory framework. People have introduced competition, liberalization, and because this policy of the government allowed multiple operators to work in a single jurisdiction. So you see that the world average of mobile cellular telephone subscription is 96.8. That was for 2015. It is active. Indicators in terms of Asia Pacific, you see that Asia Pacific is the largest home to fixed telephone subscription, 461 million subscription there. If you see the mobile, again Asia Pacific dominates with 3,737 million subscription. Mobile broadband, everywhere Asia Pacific dominates in terms of global. But the density wise, Asia Pacific is not so good compared to the global average. So this is one record that I used to prove that this sector is growing and the growth continues. Okay? So average we have already crossed 100% subscription. So in terms of mobile subscription, it is again over 100%. That doesn't mean that every individual has one mobile phone, but in terms of SIM subscription, this is a very interesting record, and we are progressing significantly. So in terms of data access, internet access, it is around 45%, and most of the access is through, if you see, GPRS is and 3G, most significant contribution comes from the mobile access. And now we are talking about mobile broadband proliferation. Even in Nepal, you see, there's a lot of news about 4G or LTE adoption in Nepal. People are very curious of doing it. Connected objects in use by 2016, a 30% rise from 2015. And similarly, the same report, data report, says that by 2020, this will be 20.8 billion things connected to the internet. There is another report from Juniper Research. The number of IoT connected devices will number 38.5 billion in 2020, up from 13.4 billion in 2015, a rise of over 285%. See, the research reports are not consistent in the forecast. The basis of research are different. I give another forecast: 33 billion internet devices by 2020, and says that 4 connected devices for every person in the world. So the strategy analytics. So, but whether these numbers are consistent or not, forget it. But the conclusion is that it is going to grow. And it is going to grow more than the number of people inhabited by this world. Because it's not only the people connected to the internet, all devices are going to be connected. Device will talk to the device will talk to the people, and people will talk to people. So we will see that kind of proliferation. These numbers, I don't know how many numbers. So we are talking about machine-to-machine and IoT things. I will not talk much about this. What does it mean? The meaning is technologies are going to be disruptive. And our laws and regulations, our policies, our strategies, the way the governments and regulators think are not disruptive. We normally follow a very traditional method of adopting newer policies and regulations. We don't see the forecast, what is going to happen in next 5-10 years in this sector, and then now prepare accordingly. How we prepare is what is happening currently, or what happened and what were the problems in the past. We try to modify easily. And this sector, what does the business people do? Because they see that it has worked elsewhere, even in the developing countries, and why not in Nepal? So they have 2 options. They ask the government and regulator for permission to use new technology or new service or new applications, and sometimes they start adopting it without an explicit green signals from the government and regulator. So sometimes I have talked to the business people many times. Don't ask. You just go ahead. If there is no explicit law that forbids you to use that technology, you just go ahead, inform the regulator, and the regulator will be forced to make laws to address the technology that you are using. But most of the technologies compliant to the existing rules and regulations. That's where this technology is not adopted. I have seen private sector doing the second thing in banking. For example, Nepal Rust Bank is a very strong regulator, has been there for a very long time, very experienced regulator. Even then, there is no guideline for this. They just inform the Rust Bank, and then Rust Bank realize that there should be a regulation on it. For example, mobile banking. E-banking. Where was the regulation when the banks started doing it? They started doing it, and then there were, the Rashtra Bank said, oh, that something is needed. For example, Rashtra Bank has created a new there. People have started using it. Now, the regulators, now they are reacting. So, if you start asking, nothing will happen because it will not happen. It will happen, but it takes a long time. So, what does the government do or the regulator do? We have two approaches again, either react negatively. Sometimes the governments react negatively. Or this, they are making a lot of money out of this, there is no permission, there is no explicit law, how can they do it? And they stop it. That's a very negative reaction. But sometimes, or most of the times, a thoughtful government or regulator doesn't react negatively. They address, they respond to development through formulation of appropriate policies and laws to facilitate in a very transparent and professional manner, so that everybody knows what everybody is doing. So, I favor the second approach by the government and regulator. I also encourage the second approach that in the previous slide I said the business to adopt. Why laws and regulation? You may say that there should be no law or regulation required that will add one more hassle for the private sector to the business. Yes, we have Nepal's Doing Business Indicator produced by the World Bank is not quite encouraging, but still laws and regulations are necessary evidence to say. Regulation is fundamental to governing societies and economies. Because there is no regulation, there is always a chance of cheating the consumer. So, regulatory processes also allow policymakers to balance competing interests. There are interests. The business wants to increase the profit, the consumer wants quality of service, affordable prices, reasonable prices. So there is a conflict of interest. Who comes in between? So the regulatory instruments come in between and they do it. So laws and regulations have been very critical to the development of democracy and modern state. We cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid tax. People say that this tax is too much. The government has to run their business. The tax is essential for the government to run. And they have a social obligation to distribute the benefits. The realities of network device and service convergence as a PET. You can see NTA is a telecom sector regulator, there is a broadcast regulation, and there is something IT, there is no IT regulation as such. But everything has converged. The network has converged, the device have converged, the service have converged. We have not responded it enough that this convergence is a reality in terms of policy, legal, and regulatory framework. The OTTs are always there, but no regulatory certainty and clarity. I have downloaded an app in my mobile where I can see television live, almost all television channels. I can hear all the FM radio stations in Nepal in my mobile. But can you do it? We don't. I can't say. I have no answer. The regulators don't have answers to it. If you ask the government, they don't have an answer. So these realities are there, we are experiencing, but we don't have the answer. There's no legal clarity on it. That's why the second approach of the government should be there. So we have not prepared enough for proliferation of wireless devices, short range and low power. You can see wireless devices here and there, but can we allow every devices to come into Nepal without any regulation? Yes or no? If you start regulating, you are kind of creating a bottleneck. But regulate for the sake of regulating or for information or bringing them into some kind of framework, a responsible business or responsible use, but not to create an action. That's what is my position here. We have not even allowed the adoption of 4G mobile technologies. I remember when first LTE technology was adopted in December 2009. December 2009, it's more than 6 years we are talking about it, but it's not a reality yet. So we have not thought about 5G. We, in principle, accept technology neutrality. When you give a spectrum to use, you should be allowed to use any technologies, any efficient, cost-effective technologies. Now, you cannot say what ISPs can do and what network service provider can do. ISPs are allowed to pull their fiber to the home, and NSPs are doing the same thing. ISPs are allowed to provide end-to-end IP voice services, and we say that SIP is not allowed sometimes. So there are a lot of confusion because the technology is so much blurred. The services and technology, there's no distinction between services. We still differentiate between voice and data service. The Viber, what you say, is voice service or data service or video service. This is a reality everybody uses. Even now, locally, if you have a good bandwidth, good speed, it's better to use Viber for voice communication rather than using mobile because of the quality issues. But what is that? So there are issues. And this IP has not been properly understood in the policy and regulatory regime. We don't understand what IP can do. It matters because the business model that these telcos are creating are based on voice, not it data driven. So the moment your business model is created in one paradigm and technology and services convergence gives you another paradigm, the conflict is there. And that conflict management is a headache for even for the regulators. I'll try to talk about where the regulator can be a barrier for technology adoption. If the regulator doesn't allocate or assign enough spectrum on a timely manner, then technology adoption becomes a problem. If a regulator assigns spectrum based on a particular technology, then adoption of technology which is more efficient and more cost-effective, more recent, there is a barrier. If your license creates restriction on the kind of services, your services are based on voice, media, the service based on media. You differentiate, this is a voice service, this is a data service, this is a mobile service, this is a fixed service, this is a video service, and your license is allocated or assigned that way. And then you have conflicts because everything is bit, I said. If there is a legal and regulatory framework that lacks to address newer services and applications, I said these frameworks are made based on what happened in the past and what is currently happening in the present. And And changing this is quite a tough task. When we change it, we change in the context. And changing in the context is a controversial issue for the government and regulator. For example, the ISPs started providing intranet services. They started connecting the banks through optical fiber. And there was something already NSP, network service, VSAT network service provider. They were providing, connecting banks through VSAT networks. Now they had problem. Their business model collapsed. Okay. So, and then we started responding it. The response was particular to this issue, and it was a conflicting issue. So we are trying to facilitate somebody's business legally, and it becomes a problem. So persistent confusion on the emerging services and applications could be discouraging for innovators. The innovators could be here or elsewhere. With this, I conclude by saying that a proactive regulator should consider future and facilitate the growth, the development, and the pace of technology, service, and applications. Not based on a particular incident to address one incident, but a larger context with transparency, creating a conducive environment for the
Can you come up to the mic? Don't remove the mic, please understand. What is not clear to secure?
Good morning. My question is that we are as a consumer, we are purchasing the mobile phone embedded with the 4G technology and 3G technology. If we are not getting this, we are also paying the tax for that. And if we are not able to implement that 4G technology in Nepal, who will be responsible to initiate, to write the issue to the government? Because I know that all government or all political politicians or whatever the stakeholder is there, some of them are even don't know what the meaning of the 4G, LTE, 3G, but some authorized like Nepal telecom.
Please make your question very short and specific. I think
and my question is very simple: is that if I am using the 4G technology phone and paying the tax, I have to use that facility in Nepal. If I am not going to use the technology, why should we pay the tax? And who will initiate that?
First thing is you are not paying for 4G technology, number one. So you are not paying tax for this because 4G is not available here, number one. So there is no question of paying tax when you are not using it. And who is responsible for opening this is the government and the regulators. So we are considering opening it, but there are other issues because there are some anomalies in the licensing process which has to be clear, and there are liabilities which are very distinct for different operators. So we are trying to manage those things and then open afresh.
Thank you, Anand, very much. Thank you for discussion. I'm going to give you the mic today, so you can talk to to him about regulatory matters. As I said, he has spent a long time in this space. So he knows everything there is to be known about regulation, at least in this country. So next speaker will be Vesna. Finally, there is someone whose last name I can't really pronounce, which is a common problem for my name. So Vesna is with NCC. Right, NCC is the counterpart of APD in the European and Middle Eastern region. I think that's the most simple way to explain it. Just like what APD does in the Asia Pac region, right? NCC does that. NCC also does a bunch of other things, which you can go to labs.right.net and find out. So this night today we're going to talk about RIPE Atlas and RIPE Stack to get network outage events.
Hi, my name is Vesna. I work for NCC, as Garab introduced me, and I'm a community builder. I have been working for NCC for 17 years. The last 5 I've been a community builder. Before that I was a trainer. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be at SANOG and in Nepal and Kathmandu. It has been my dream to visit this country, and now this is my dream coming true. So thank you, Garab. Thank you, everybody at SANOG. So apart from being a regional internet registry just like APNI, but then for Europe, Middle East, and former Soviet republics, it's a mouthful, RIPE NCC also operates several monitoring services such as RIPE Atlas Greece, which is something like route views that has been mentioned here yesterday, and DNS-Mon and RIPESTAT. And in this talk, I'm going to briefly introduce these services, specifically on the use case of the network outages that followed up the earthquake that very unfortunately happened last year in Nepal. And I have prepared many slides, but I'm going to only cover these 2 first parts. So the view of Nepal, the measurements that have shown the consequences of the earthquake, and for the rest, please see the slides that will be published on the SANOG website. Tomorrow, very early in the morning, I'm giving a tutorial. So if you're interested in more details of how RIPE Atlas works and what it can do for you specifically, then please come to the tutorial. It should be hands-on virtual, but that will depend on the connectivity. So how many of you have heard of RIPE Atlas before? Can I see a show of hands? Wow, wonderful picture, thank you. Well, for those of you who need a very short introduction, RIPE Atlas is a global, open, distributed internet measurement platform that consists of thousands of hardware probes. They look like this, and these are hosted by volunteers around the globe. These perform 24/7, every 5 minutes, ping, traceroute, DNS lookup to the 13 root name servers. And since these root name servers are anycasted, that is hundreds of destinations from about 9,000 sources of these hardware probes. And all these measurements are collected, analyzed, and displayed by RIPE NCC, so that we produce these internet maps that were about 10 active RIPE Atlas probes since last week, and I'm hoping that after this conference there will be at least 10 more. Most of them are around Kathmandu, as you can see, and then there is one very much in the south, in Hetauda, if I say that correctly, so that's like really a nice exception. And on top of that, there is also a larger server which we call RIPE-Atlas anchor. And there is about 170 of these servers around the globe. There is one in Kathmandu, operated by NREM here, and it is sponsored by APNIC. So APNIC has this cooperation program with RIPE-NCC where they sponsor multiple RIPE-Atlas anchors in APNIC service region, and one of them is in Kathmandu. So thank you for hosting us here. And so another view of the RIPE-Atlas data in specific country is produced by a tool written by a colleague of mine, Emil, and the tool, it's quite a cool tool, but yeah, it's kind of a slip. It's called IXP Country Jedi. And so it's very powerful measurement that is done between all the probes within a country. So it's a mesh of measurements from probe to probe, and it shows the connectivity within the country and are those paths going through the internet exchange. So if the path stays in the country and it's going through the internet exchange, it's green here. And if it doesn't go through the internet exchange, it's yellow. So it looks very good here in Nepal. You have very tight, interconnected local network. So this is quite nice. And you can actually go to all these URLs and check out more. So last year, when the earthquake happened, Martin Levy, who is actually here in the audience, look, you're on the slides, he emailed us and said, hey, looking at this anchor, which is happened to be in Nepal, we can see that a lot of measurements are actually not sending results anymore. So there is this kind of outage of several probes, and you can see that in our visualization. After I submitted this talk, we did the analysis. So another colleague of mine actually looked into the historical data and took a different were lost. And you can see from here that there were several events within that day and within several days where some probes went offline, but a lot of probes actually stayed online throughout the earthquake. So we have another tool that looks at the same data. It's called latency norm, and this is a specific view of the anchor from the global probes. So these are the first row is probes from Holland, and then Switzerland, Spain, and Ireland. So this is like a global view of the connectivity of the Nepalese anchor within several days around the earthquake. So on the 26th, there was a big outage. You can see like we didn't receive any data, and then again on the 3rd of May. And then again on the 12th of May. So these are kind of consequences of the event that has happened here. And all this is actually available for you to browse and to move these time sliders and so on. I'm not doing it live because of the connectivity, so these are just the screenshots. If we look into more detailed picture and we look at the measurements from the actual probes in Nepal towards the Nepalese anchor, then you get even more details, like at which exact time the probes couldn't reach the anchor anymore, when did they reconnect again. So all this is visible using RIPE-Atlas map. Smaller oval on the left, and then there was like a very long time when the anchor was down. It looks like that to us, and I will be talking with the anchor host to see how did it look from your side. So again, this is yet another visualization by another colleague of mine, and it's an animated GIF. So if you look now, you can see the probes being switched on and switched off. So you have like this green bubbles, and then the red bubbles all around Kathmandu during the 16 hours which we took the data and then visualized this on the other service called CartoDB. So this is kind of a picture that you can get, and the more probes we have deployed, you can see this data in a higher resolution, so to say. So this was all about the regional picture. How did it look for the whole of Nepal? How did it look for that part of the world? But if you want to do the monitoring of your own servers, you can do that by using the ping measurement results in your Isinga setup. And this is just some kind of how to on the instructions and the steps that you need to do. Okay, so this was about the RIPE Atlas, and the other set of tools we have are based on the routing data. So we have this service called RIS, Routing Information Service, and the interface to visualize the data is called RIPE-STAT. And looking into the Nepalese routing data, we can see several events and how the number of connected AS numbers and prefixes actually went down gradually, and only later it came up again. So from 35 to 25 to 20, and that was the minimum. So at some point, only 20 networks were still connected to the global internet, as much as we could see. And then after a while, that went back to the 35 networks, which is the usual number, the way we see it in RIPE-STAT. If you look at the history of certain prefixes, you can also see that there was this time around the 26th of April where we didn't get any data about the routing history. So that was really the moment when it got disconnected, and then around the May of 3rd again, and then the 15th of May again. So you can see the effects also using these kind of routing tools. And then the most interesting one, the one that gives the prettiest video animation, is a tool called BGPlay. It's part of RIPE-STAT. The data is based on this routing information service, and it shows you the withdrawals and announcements of all the prefixes, and it also shows you the historical view. So we store all this data, so you can play around and like put in your prefix and see what was the effect of any network outage event on your prefix and your AS number. And finally, we also have this DNS monitoring service for the CCTLDs, which is also based on the RIPE Atlas anchors, and we monitor Nepalese CCTLD, and you can also see the outage shown on this tool. So it's not a nice thing to talk about, but if we have to look at the effects, there are tools to actually help us out, see how did it go, and also based on this data, we can see where can be improved. So which critical services are needed to operate, who needs to improve the peering between themselves so that these services will be more robust next time. So as a conclusion, we could only see from very far away from Europe and from our point of view, how does it look like based on our data. But what is very important is the local knowledge, and that is critical for the analysis. So we are looking for the cooperation between our analysts and the local people who have the local knowledge of the network and the resources. And so the next time we will be able to do a better analysis of these kinds of events. So we did a lot of research to prepare for this presentation, and we also wanted to publish it on our blog, on our RIPE Labs, but we are actually wondering what kind of information information would you locally like to see in this kind of article? So please approach me later in the break or tomorrow. I will be staying here until the end of the conference, until Friday actually. So let's talk about how we can publish this information to make it most useful. And if you want to learn how to use Run Battles, then come tomorrow to the tutorial. I think I should stop here. Any questions?
Any questions for Vesna and Ram? Ram, sir, can you come in?
Hi. Two questions. One is about the Nepalese TLD, CCTLD, as you said, it went offline. I'm just curious, what caused it to go completely offline? As far as I can see, it is hosted on multiple other players, like PCH is there, Appnic is there, which is hosting the TLD. So, do you have any possible data on what caused full outage on the TLD?
I think you can see here that it wasn't the full outage because some of those lines, let's say the green lines, actually show that the Nepalese TLD was accessible during the time period. Only one of the servers was actually completely inaccessible. That's the gray line, and many of them, the red ones, were actually having very long latency, more than under 72 milliseconds. But only one of them, for a certain period of time, was completely inaccessible.
Yeah, makes sense. Sorry, it was just like NP from Barbie. The second question is, I really like the tool from am I saying it right? iWorldTrace. I was wondering if it is possible to use such tool to originate a trace from a specific ASN. As far as I can see, one can specify the country and not the specific network.
Let's bring it up to later, like let's have a private discussion.
Sure.
I will try to understand the question and see how can I help with it.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, any more questions? I have a minute and a half while Ram is setting up the laptop. Yep, Martin.
I'm going to answer the previous question, but in a good way. Most of the stuff is on GitHub. Most of this stuff is open source. Every API is documented on the right site. Go write code or modify somebody else's. Emil's mapping is on GitHub as well. So there's a lot of data here that you can go do an enormous amount with it by just looking at existing code and then applying it. I do this, and it is way too much fun. So enjoy.
Thank you, Martin. And this is a very good cue for me to say, please join one of our hackathons. We had 2 last year, and as you can see from this meme here, it was a lot of fun. And the next 2 are going to happen in Copenhagen and in Madrid. I know it's really far away for you, but if you have an opportunity, please join us. It's 2 days of really hard work, hard coding, and it's very interdisciplinary. So there are operators, there are programmers, designers, and the results are published again on GitHub, given back to the community. And it's a lot of good code and interesting results. So please join us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is what a RIPE Atlas looks like. Actually, I like the older version, which is even smaller. Vesna was bringing 10 of these, but they haven't arrived.
There's still 10.
Okay, so there's still some around. The suitcase is probably still in Istanbul or somewhere. And a lot of us have this everywhere. So talk to Vesna during lunchtime, and she can explain these things to you. There is a tutorial tomorrow morning on how to make best use of the tools that are built around Atlas and other tools at RIPE. So If you want to attend that, you are most welcome. Next presentation is our closing keynote presentation by Dilip Agarwal. Dilip is the founder, managing director of World Communications. He started the ISP in 1994 with dial-up only, and now he's one of the largest ISPs in the country. His presentation is titled "Growing Your Network with Jugaad." Well, I'll let him explain. I think it's part of his presentation explaining that. I think the gentleman here is still struggling with the display. Okay, now it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav. Really appreciate it. In Nepal as well. Not always in the best of ways, but as a way to get by, a quick fix and a way to fix the problem. So I just want to get a show of hands to see how many of us here actually understand what Jugaad means. Okay, well, a significant portion except for our guests who don't belong to this region. So let me start first by discussing what Jugaad is. So Jugaad is an innovative, frugal fix for a challenging problem, usually in a resource-constrained environment. So when you need to get by with a quick solution to a problem and you're short of cash, you think of Jugaad. And it's something that's practiced heavily in the region. It's part of the mindset, the mentality. And there's this good book that was written about Jugaad innovation, which discusses how this can be implemented in companies. Jugaad is now accepted as a management technique globally for fostering innovation. So it's a homegrown way of thinking and problem solving that's native to our region. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about some case studies, some examples of Jugaad that me and my company have done over the past 20 years that has played a pivotal role in growing our company, in addressing the market, or in being successful the way we have been. So the first case study I would like to present is from 1994. This is when we were thinking about starting an email service in Nepal, and there are some people here that I know who are from that era, and they will recognize the components here. But it's not important for you to know the components because these are really, really obsolete items. You don't really need to know them. What I wanted to emphasize is the nature of this solution. It was like putting together disparate items sourced from various areas to put together a unique solution. So we had a PC that was a 486 processor, something that's probably a 10th of the processing power, or maybe even a 20th of the processing power of the phone in your hand. A modem that could establish data connectivity over dial-up, even over noisy international lines from a company called Telebit, which unfortunately doesn't exist any longer, but really which got me going. A phone line and a US robotics courier modem, again, something that's an obsolete component. Just to give you an idea how these things looked, that's a simple PC, that's a modem, and that's another modem, but another modem that's very highly specialized that people didn't really use in day-to-day life, but was used in Africa, in places like India, to establish reliable connectivity over noisy lines. So you can still transfer data, really slow, but you can still transfer data. So the innovation or the Jugaad here was getting these components together to form this solution, which enabled us to kick off this internet email service in Nepal, which enabled Warlink to start and for it to reach this stage. If we hadn't put together this solution and thought with that Jugaad mentality, we would not have gone and ventured into this email service, and we would not have done internet and all the other good things that
came after that. The second case I would like to present is using Linux on an assembled PC. Again, let's go back to 1996. Linux was there, but mainstream, no. You know, it was more used by hobbyists, by startups like me. But if you went to an enterprise, to a service provider, if you use Linux, they would laugh at you. They would think that, yeah, this is a kid, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But we all know today that Linux is mainstream. Everybody runs on Linux. I think even Google's Android runs on Linux. So, you know, Linux is pretty much mainstream today. But back then, no one knew. Back then, people would use Solaris on Sun, or they would use some other flavor of Unix on an IBM AIX or any other server solution that would cost probably 100 times more than Linux on a PC. What we started off with was assembled PCs with a Pentium processor running Red Hat Linux, and that enabled us to build a solution to provide internet connectivity in Nepal at a low investment. Frankly, we would not have been able to afford buying expensive servers, and if we didn't have Linux, and if we didn't come up with this Jugaad solution, we would pretty much be out of business by now. So this is what the solution looked like. Again, for some of our friends here from that era, they would recognize this. A simple 2511 router from Cisco with dial-up modems that you could connect. We started off with 4 US Robotics Courier modems. We had a lease line to Canada where it connected to the internet at an abysmally low speed of 64 kbps. So that was a lease line to Canada. 64 kbps today, I don't know if who would be happy with that. But that's what we had to do it back then. This connected to an Ethernet hub to 2 PCs running Linux. The first PC was our primary DNS. It did TACACS authentication for users and rudimentary billing. The second server ran secondary DNS and email service using Qmail. And this pretty much was the next stage from our early setup to provide full internet services in Nepal. So again, you know, we adopted Linux very early on. In fact, I would like to boast here that we probably ushered the Linux era in Nepal by being the first company to implement it, to start using it on a commercial scale. And I personally trained a lot of people in Linux who went on to spread the seeds, so to say, in the country. The third case study I would like to present is something that we set up in Kathmandu and we still continue to use today. It's a citywide outdoor Ethernet network for broadband services. Back in 2003, we were the largest ISP. We had lots of dial-up customers, but they were asking for more. They were asking for higher speeds that dial-up just couldn't support. We went to NTC, we asked them for their copper wire, which they would lease to us for enterprise connectivity, but they were not willing to let us put ADSL on it because they had their own plans. So that option got crossed out. We wanted to put in coax cable and do a DOCSIS kind of network, but back then, the coax-based networks were monopolized by the cable TV operators, and they were very nervous about some other guy coming and laying coax cable in their neighborhoods, and we were very afraid that if we got into a mess with them, they would go and cut our cables. So we decided to stay away from coax cables as well. We did have a wireless broadband network with Motorola Canopy, which worked really well, but the CPEs were very expensive. We couldn't really penetrate the domestic broadband market with that. It was good for enterprises. So we had to come up with some Jugaad solution to this problem. We had to come up with some way to serve customers with a wired broadband service that was still low cost, but with which we could bring connectivity. So what we did is we came up with this solution where you can still see in Kathmandu, and I apologize, we contribute to making this city a little uglier than it is. We put these poles, on utility poles, we put these boxes with switches inside them, common Ethernet switches, which are connected using Cat5 cable, which is shielded, along with a power cable that runs through it to power the downstream switches. So it's this cascaded Ethernet switches running on utility poles, and if they all congregate in a central point in the neighborhood where it's backhauled on Ethernet. So this is what we implemented in 2003. this solution. This is what it looks like today. I don't have pictures from back then to put, so I just took a picture a few days back. So today it has a nice Ethernet switch in it, which is Metro Ethernet certified. We do some treatment to make it environmentally hardened. It's manageable. It does all kinds of cool things. But back when we started, it was unmanaged switch. But it did have VLAN segregation, so we could address the broadcast problem. When we started 2004, by 2007, we had put copper something that we all have to deal with, any network service provider in this country. It serves fairly well. The fourth case study I would like to present takes us to 2006. And during this time, we were growing on our internet bandwidth requirements, but unfortunately, for everybody, it was all on satellite. So we were all buying expensive satellite capacity to backhaul our internet bandwidth to the global internet. At that point, we were at around 32 Mbps. And we had a satellite link going to Hawaii, and it cost us around $800 per meg. And we were really looking for ways to save on that. So the idea came that why don't we try to optimize this WAN link? Let's see what we can do on that. We researched lots of commercial solutions for WAN optimization. There are companies like Parabit, Expand. Not sure if they still exist today, but these companies had solutions for enterprises which work mainly by looking at repeated bits in data streams. Unfortunately, the ISP traffic doesn't have a lot of repetition in it. And those solutions were not as effective. So we decided to work something out on our own. What we did is we developed software, which is really low-level C coding, encoded software, which sat on a server between the satellite connectivity and our network. And it would do compression and decompression. Okay? So we implemented LZW compression. So the data would get compressed in real time, the data stream would get compressed in real time, and decompressed on the other. We were able to eventually save 12 to 15% on our bandwidth, through this compression decompression, which in those days translated to almost $5,000-6,000 a month. So gave us a real edge by doing that. This solution only lasted for 2 years because in 2008 we got fiber and this thing became obsolete. The fifth case study I would like to talk about, and the last one, is implementing a VRAS with contention. Now, in 2007, we wanted to, we were getting free services already, but we wanted to give differentiated services to different customer segments. For example, to a premium enterprise customer, we wanted to give a contention ratio of 1:4. For maybe a domestic user who was very price conscious, a 1:8. But there wasn't a way we could figure out how to do that using commercial solutions out there. We could allocate IP address spaces to different packages, so different subnets altogether. But that's a big waste of IP addresses, something that our friends at Apnic would really not like. So we were really trying to come up with a solution where we could still give this differentiated contention ratio to different customers without having to waste a lot of IP addresses or by allocating IP pools. So what did we do? We used RPPPoE, which is something out there in the public domain, put that onto Linux servers, so this served as our PPPoE VRAS. So every time a user connected, what would happen is the PPPoE VRAS would insert a rule in a Linux bandwidth manager running HTTP. Okay? So it's a rule for that customer's IP address, and the contention ratio that customer has subscribed to would be inserted into a bandwidth manager. And whenever that user disconnected, the rule would be removed. Okay? Now This was a very jugaad, quick fix kind of innovative solution, which worked. We were able to. So what I want to demonstrate by presenting these case studies is that having this jugaad mentality is very important. Okay? It's very easy to go out there and spend big bucks and buy the best solution. And with due respect to our sponsors here, you should go do that. But that may not always be the option available. You don't always have the bucks to spend. Okay, number one. Number two is the vendors may not have a solution that works for you. I mean, today we have tens of thousands of customers who those solutions work for us. But what if you're a startup? What if you're operating a small network somewhere? If their solutions won't work for you because they don't make solutions for people of your size. They deal with bigger networks. So in that situation, it's better to have that jugaad mentality and try to figure out a solution that works within your budget and it meets your exact requirements. And if we hadn't done the stuff we did during in those case studies I presented, we probably wouldn't even be here today. We wouldn't have existed. And if we did, and even if we did exist, we probably would not have grown the way we have grown because we definitely didn't have the capital and machine. So I would like to leave you with this final thought: think jugaad and try to grow your network with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Villa. Any questions for Ajay? Please come up to the mic.
If you promote these types of jugaad technology to the enterprise business, you don't think that you are going to exploit all the business, all the enterprise business, because as you know that if either you will do the enterprise business or you will not do the enterprise business. The jugaad technology is not going to give the output as expected in the enterprise market. So the jugaad technology and we
Now, you see, it depends on where you are at your stage. Like today in my network, at least in our network, we don't have anything that is non-standard and jugaad. And that's a decision we took because we were reaching the scale and we had the finances. Okay? Now our jugaad mentality is trying to go into how can we serve our customers better? What differentiated products can we bring? How can we differentiate ourselves in the market with so much competition? But depending on where the service provider or the network operator or even companies are, the jugaad mentality comes in at different stages. Let's take an example. Let's say there's somebody who's running a bank network, okay? And they need to put in an email system. Now, what would they do? They'll probably go get Exchange. I don't know. They'll try using Google Mail. I don't know what they'll do. But they won't. Most likely, they won't go and set up Linux and Qmail and set up a simple low-cost solution. Why? Because the bank can afford it, and the bank wants some SLA behind it, and they're not willing to go with a solution that is quote unquote open source. But let's take the other example of a small company with 20, 25 employees, and they want to put in a solution. So I would not advise going and procuring a copy of Microsoft Exchange, fake copy and putting it in, the pirate copy. Better go put it to the next, put it in QMail or Postfix or some other MTA and set up an email system. You know, anybody who knows Linux can do it in a couple of hours and you're ready to go. So it depends on where you are at your stage of evolution and what jugaad you need to do. You know, I'm not saying you have to do jugaad in the basic technologies that your company uses, but there's always room to innovate. There's always room to do something better.
I just thought that this was a great time. I just have to say thank you. It was really a fun description. I mean, we all have our own war stories about this stuff. And I remember developing a serial port NAT back in the early 90s because so many of my friends wanted this internet thing. But now I have a word to use to describe that. Thank you.
Yeah, all innovation and creativity, right? Yeah, in fact, I've been honored, and I think you've been my first customer in my career. So in terms of things, so thank you for that. Just want to know probably a bit more. We've been seeing growth, but how do you see road ahead for OneLink in terms of growth and innovation in Nepal demographic?
Well, I think in general we have been a big failure in addressing the broadband requirements in this country. We started off great, big bang, but somewhere in the middle things just didn't work out. That's what usually has happened with a lot of things in this country. Over the past 20 years, we've just lost our way. We've had a civil war, and one thing after the other has just impeded us. But today our effort is to continuously invest in the network and expand because customers all over Nepal want broadband. You know, there's no doubt about that. If you bring connectivity, people will take it. So it's not a chicken and egg situation anymore. It's about building the network, and that's where we're focused. And we're quite confident that we will be able to continue growing because the market is demanding that.
Any more comments or questions for Philip?
Actually, I have a question. How do you do Jugaad on a job?
You're also the Jugaad.
Thank you very much. I think we had a pretty good. Actually, I've known Philip. I don't know, since '95 when they were only doing emails. Okay, this is stop working there.
I was a student in 11 or 12 in St. Xavier's when he came to me.
Yeah, so since '95, and I've seen. In fact, I think I got my first Linux CD from Orling because I was trying to play with it back then. And the only people who had Linux Slack were something. The Slack was 1.0 CD that I borrowed from these guys. And went and did my first Linux box. So thank you for all of that. Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Billy. So now we go into the closing, short closing ceremony, the formal ceremony. So I'd like to invite Sri Babu up here to chair the closing ceremony. I'd also like to invite Mr. Sumanlal Pradhan, the president of ICT Association of Nepal. I stand up here. Also like to invite Jehalud Kabir up here. We don't have a long program or anything. It's a lot of thanks, and we'll be giving out the certificates. Before we go into the formal ceremony, we also have one additional announcement. If you noticed since yesterday, the next APIC meeting is going to be in this region, in Bangladesh, in approximately 6 to 7 months from now. So I'd like to invite Paul Wilson from APIC to say a few words, and Jehadu to add to that.
Thanks very much, Gaurav. I won't take too much of your time, but as Gaurav mentioned, the number of people, the amount of energy, the content here, I would be so grateful if you would help us in Dhaka by bringing some of that along. The APIC meeting, if you haven't been, is one that has been going for many years. We're up to, it'll be the 42nd meeting this year in Dhaka. And we have a program that is rather similar to SANOG. It has both training workshops and tutorials and a conference program. It's got special content for APIC members, and I guess most of you here are APIC members, and I'm very grateful to you for that. Your chance at the APIC meeting will be to come along to meet many of the APIC staff who you might deal with in terms of your membership and services, to hear about developments from APIC, and also very importantly to give your feedback and input to APIC in terms of helping us to be delivering better and improved services to you in every way possible. So again, this is my request to you. I would be very grateful for your presence in Dhaka. Please come. I hope it will be useful to you as well. And by the way, for those who might need some sort of partial travel assistance, there is a fellowship. I hope you'll stay in touch. I'll hand over to GT now, who's got a little more on the meeting as a host. So thanks, GT. Thank you.
All right, once again, I'm here to welcome you to Dhaka, the APIC 42, which will be held from 29th September to 6th October, with the capacity of executive committee member. And to some extent, I'll try to convey the event as well as a convener. So ISPAB is welcoming all to Dhaka to attend the APIC 42. A little detail about where it will be. It will be in the middle of the city, the Pan Pacific Sonaga Hotel, and lots of traffic around, but a very good place to hang around. And how will you go? Most of the transit points are directly connected to Dhaka International Airport. So we are more than sure that you will not find any problem coming to Dhaka, except that the queue in the the immigration will be a bit loud for the local people, but the foreigners are coming from abroad. It will be very easy. The visas on arrival are easy as well. You can have lots of information from the visitbangladesh.gov.bd site, but to tell you in very brief, all the countries, most of the countries outside of this particular region, they will have visas on arrival, And the requirements are pretty straightforward. All you need to do is take $500 US in your pocket and a valid passport and come to Bangladesh. So we have plenty of monumental places in our country. If you can plan, we'll be very much glad to let you roam around and visit the beautiful Bangladesh. And to give you a glimpse of what we have over there, here is a short presentation, a video presentation. All right, that's a beautiful Bangladesh song here. Better was the video.
Sing it.
Yes.
That's not Jugaad. You just put a microphone. That will be a microphone.
In the school of life, life is about endless learning. Feel the vibe of the longest beach, learn the power of inner strength. It's Royal Bengal Tiger's territory. For dangerously sweet reward, learn how to collect honey. Unlearn. Give yourself the surprise you deserve. Yes, you always loved racing. Learn to race without wheels. When the heart opens, you suddenly learn to accept the invitation of happiness in its fullest version. See how hope defeats all boundaries, and how meaning of inner silence revealed in words. Experience the spirit of freedom in the air. The father of nation, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Silence. Every alley has a story that embraces. you to love your language more. Feel the monsoon magic. You will learn the true meaning of warmth here. Here, life happens. Welcome to the school of life. The mission going on. Welcome to beautiful Bangladesh.
So thank you. Most of you know me. If you have any query regarding the program or related issues, just let me know. And welcome to School of Epinic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Paul. Okay. Next, we will go into appreciating our speakers who are here. I'd like to request Ching to do the honors for our keynote speakers. American. Sorry. No need to that. Thank you. Next, I would actually like to ask Indigo to hand out the gifts for both of our speakers. Mad-san. Gaurav Sethi. Raymond Khan. Raymond from Huawei. Yeah. Someone from Huawei? Richard Lam. Nisa Timal Singh. Thank you, Indira. Thank you, Indira. Next, I'd like to request Samit Jana from the NPI board and who's done a lot of work in the background here for this event to hand out the gift. We'll start with Ashley Jones. Coming up,
blessings for the Lord. Vesna Manoyovic. Did I get that right? Manahir Khan. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to request Rupesh Restaurant to hand over Anaras Kanal. Samit Jana. Now we'll go to all Australians. We would like to invite Paul Wilson. So you might be wondering why all the Australians are ganged up together. Well, we really like the traditional window. The Australian costume doesn't like it, so we make sure you get metal. Next is Philip Smith. Vivek Neelam. Okural Okuri. And Tuan. I think thank you very much to interviewers, Samit and Rupesh. We will continue with the closing. Before we go to the formal Thanksgiving, I'd like to thank our core committee members, program committee chair and co-chairs, the fellowship committee chairs and co-chairs of SANOG for putting this event together. We will soon be calling out the call for volunteers for our program committee, most likely next week or the beginning of February. So, and the call for volunteers will go out on the SANOG mailing list. So please join the SANOG mailing list if you are not already on it, and please volunteer. We need a new blood on the PC. Our current chair of the PC is Anand Dasgupta. Unfortunately, he could not be here. The fellowship committee is chaired by Jayadul. Thank you on behalf of the SANOG community for all the work you do. As we've said earlier, this is not the end of SANOG. There's a lot more things happening today in the afternoon and tomorrow, tutorials, and then there are workshops. The tutorials will be split between this room, the third one room on the other side, and then the agency room, which is at the end of this one, end of this corner over here. 3 rooms. The next SANOG, Jeff, do you want to make an announcement of that? Unfortunately, we did not have the next host here, so Jiao is going to make an announcement on the behalf for SANOG28.
On behalf of the Indian counterpart of SANOG host ISP, AI, and NIXI, I welcome you to go to Mumbai during August first week, and the same curriculum will be followed there. And perhaps the Mumbai event will be in Trident Hotel, the same venue, because that will be the most convenient place for most of us to go. So be there. Thank you.
Now, before we go to the final vote of thanks, anything, any persons, any comments? Open house? There's none. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to request Sunil Pradan to give a vote of thanks on behalf of the host. Sunil is obviously a member of NPIX and part of our community here. And he's also the president of the Aspirations in Nepal. So,
thank you, Gaurav. Mr. Chairman, our fellow guests, participants to the event, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me the privilege and a great joy to extend a vote of thanks on behalf of the host organizations to all those who have contributed in a way or the other to make this event a success. Firstly, I'd like to express my gratitude towards our Honorable Minister, Mr. Sridhar Rai, for his gracious presence to the inaugural program. I'd also like to extend my special thanks to Nepal Telecom Authority and the government of Nepal for being ever supportive and encouraging to us. Financial aspect is always a vital one for organizing any program. Having said so, I'd like to acknowledge the sponsors who have greatly contributed to make this program a huge success. A big thank to you, the principal sponsor Huawei, diamond sponsor Juniper, and Airtel and Internet Society, the platinum sponsors. Special appreciation goes to our sponsor Apni for your tremendous support. Similarly, I'd like to thank our sponsor ICANN, Google, NSRC, Cisco, Cambian Networks, and TNCC, NetNode, and Extreme. And not to forget, PCS, Fortinet, and Worley for sponsoring this event. I am also thankful to the sporting ISPs, Webster for Classic, Mercantile, Luminet, Firenet, Broadlink, Worley, Subisu, and Nepal Telecom. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, my deep sense of appreciation goes to keynote speakers Mary Kay and Dilip Agrawal, and Philip and Brian, and all other instructors. I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge my technical team members for arranging all the required technical infrastructure for the entire program. Also, I cannot stop myself from mentioning the names of some people who have an important role in this program. Rupesh, who led the event committee, and Samit, who led the sponsor committee. Without their sheer dedication and determination, this event could not have been of this form. Hard work by secretariat team and all the volunteers are also commendable. My huge thanks goes to all. I am also thankful towards Norbu, Kabir, and Laura of SANOG for trusting us and giving us this golden opportunity to host the event in Kathmandu. Last but not the least, thanks goes to all the SANOG27 participants for your presence. I wish you have a fruitful workshop and a pleasant stay here in Kathmandu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suji. I think we now go for lunch. After lunch, we have tutorials, 3 panel of tutorials in different halls. There is signage outside now, which will tell you which halls the tutorials are in. Also, a specific request to all our foreign participants to gather at the atrium downstairs at 6:30 today, because we'll take you out. so that you're not standing somewhere. So please, for all the foreign guests, the atrium downstairs at 6:30, or 10 minutes after the last tutorial ends. It's that way. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in Mumbai.